goes in my budget ordinance, but there was only one request to increase, and that was New Hope Fire Department. But I have left it in the budget as it stands right now, as it was placed in last year. I did not put the increase in. I think so. Would you like, just so you'd have a copy of this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We're gonna do that. Just,
Let all the commissioners see the tax
yeah,
rates.
if you do that.
Were there any requests for any decreases?
No.
Only one for increase?
No, sir.
Okay, you want to start then at, as we get the tax rates, we can certainly look at the tax rates and look at the individual fire departments, starting at Faro Fire. At the pleasure of the board, of course, is to, do whatever you'd like, but if you want to get the rates, and then look at the rates and see if there were if any questions on the fire departments. I know earlier we talked about Marmac and Rosewood, Marmac being affected by the Lee plant, and Rosewood, of course, being affected by the Lee plant also. So if we look at and if you've got some requests for some increases, and we look at the tax rates, and it's whatever the pleasure of the board is. But if you'd like to wait to see your tax rates before
Yeah, they're gonna
we get
make, you want to hit, and when she brings us copies back, just.
Yeah, if we could skip over the fire districts and go
Okay.
on further.
Then we'll come
Is that
back.
possible, Mr. Chairman?
Let's go. Yes, sir.
All right. We'll just come back as soon as they bring those in here. Okay, so if you go to let's go to page 6.
Community Development Fund.
Yeah, there's nothing on that, but on the Community Development Fund, those would be based on grants or
Grant.
community development funds, so we would anticipate those after July 1st.
I have a question on that. The 201,000 2 years ago, and then it went to 73,000. But the amended budget in 12-13 was went up to 929,000. But actual, of course, is 27,000.
Yes.
But estimated, and then you have zeros here.
Yes.
I guess I just don't understand.
It's community
CDBG.
development block grants, scatter grants,
Yep.
and the catalyst grant. But also, remember, we get grants, and one of those was for the water tower at Park East. If you recall, we actually received $500,000 or $550,000 from community development assistance to help with that tower. So that was included, so that inflated it, plus the scatter grant of $400,000 and some that year, so, yeah.
That was about 4 years ago.
Well, the payout didn't occur, like the water tower occurred in the end of 2011. And so though we had the funds, we didn't, we had to record, we spent them, then we requested them, then we received them, so we hit that year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's purely, whatever
Is that
you
Mr.
receive.
Harris? Is he?
David
controls the-
Harris.
Yeah,
Mhm.
David Harris.
And David actually helped us write all of our CDBG. He helps us write and we do an administrative contract, and bid out services. But we also, he helps us write some of our rural grants on utilities and on our community assistance grants for like the water towers. He helps us write those. And in some cases, he's done it gratis, quite frankly.
Okay.
You got all the rates, you can jump back, okay?
Okay, any questions on the Community Development Fund?
Yep. It's whatever we receive, we put in there based on. Okay, back up.
Got your tax rates?
Does everybody have your tax rates?
Yes.
I'm gonna jump around a little bit because these are listed here one way and then. Okay, Fayroe, you look at what we're anticipating on collection and transferring $29,250. Their tax rate is 8 cents. I'll write it on here.
And we have a breakdown of that back here, is that right?
A breakdown?
Of revenue,
Well,
of that,
It would
I
be
say
that
you got a tax rate, but as
29,250.
far as the total amount received here, they're anticipating 43,000 $397. Am I correct there?
Yeah, I'm having to go to it.
You done Antioch.
On Antioch?
You at Antioch.
You want it, yeah.
I said,
Pharaoh.
Oh, we're on Pharaoh, excuse me.
go back up.
See, I put the wrong list.
29 to 50.
Okay, that's page 4, it's the first, it's the first fire department, Fayette Fire District,
Okay, all right.
right up underneath NC Housing Finance Agency.
Okay, that's where it is in this one. I'm trying to find it.
And then, of course, what you've done, Mr. Daugherty, is you've gone into
There's
the
fire law.
revenue breakdown.
Yeah, I see they're all
And
separated.
which page are,
He's right here,
Okay,
Steve.
yeah, we have to go because they're not.
Pretty good, ain't it?
no, he's into the revenue breakdown.
Okay.
I think,
Yeah, when you go to that page 378, you actually will see the breakdown of the 29,250, which is current tax levy of 18,357, current vehicle tax of $2,457. Then they get an apportionment of sales tax, and they get a county fire allotment. That $1,800 is, as I recall, dollars that the board many years ago pays to various fire departments for like extrication services, things like that, because we didn't have units that could do that. That's basically what it was.
well,
Wait a second. Mr. Daugherty, and then Mr. Aycock, and then Mr. Camardi.
No, I just want to know what page you're on.
Okay.
Well,
if
then
you'll-
you have to-
If you'll look, you've got a breakdown of the revenues back behind tab
See, it says
revenues.
revenues in
You've got-
green.
Oh, okay.
See that one?
Then you go to page
Then you go to
378.
page
That's what I
378.
want to know, 378.
Yeah,
I
I'm
know
sorry.
what category we are.
Let's slow down and make sure everybody's on the same page at all times.
You see that? Just look at the top right-hand corner, you'll see page number.
378.
Like finding the scripture in the Bible.
Well, it is, and this is halfway through that section. And look at the top. You
I
should-
see it, right,
Okay,
right.
you got it now?
I know, I'm
Yeah,
getting.
sometimes that hole punch may be right there on that number. So,
Good, Mr. Daugherty's question.
well, I reckon one of the first questions I have is, says current vehicle tax.
yes,
Now, we all know that they're changing the methodology of collection on vehicle tax. And are we budgeting in regards to what we received last year? Or are we budgeting based upon what we are anticipating to receive as a result?
anticipating to receive,
Anticipating to receive?
including that 4 months. Remember, we talked about that 4 months of how that's going to be collected? In other words, that number, if everything stays like it should, that number will then go back down. Because you will get a bigger chunk this year because you've pushed all this into this 4 months of collections for this new DMV system that's not collecting at 84% anymore, which is our average on vehicles. It's going to go up to 99 to 100%. But because it is backed up for 4 months, you're going to get, in 12 months, 16 months.
Okay. Now,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
Mr. Camardi.
I want to make sure I frame this just right. Now I'll ask a question. And the state did this. The state made the law
Yes. And
that
set the
that
timeframe in
changed
which
it
will be
4 months so
collected.
that you actually getting, the revenue will come in
Well,
in
we
12
knew no
months to
matter what it
16
would be,
months.
because of the changeover, that there would be a 90 to 120, somewhere in there, time period of this, that it was going to happen. So we all knew it was going to happen.
But it will be plus revenue for the county, versus
Well-
revenue staying in the citizen's pocket. I just
But
want
you
to
got to
see
remember,
what you
sir,
get.
here's the thing. You're going from an 84% collection rate in that time, that same time period, to close to 99 or above. So you got that, okay? But you also, in the fiscal year, are collecting for 16 months in 12 months. You see what I'm saying? It's inflated. So what we're telling everybody is don't anticipate that next year. You can anticipate the 86 going to 99 or 100. Now, how much of that is? We don't know, because you have to have a history, because it's a brand-new system.
Here's my question, Mr.
Yes.
Smith. I don't, it's not
Whatever
about
we
whether,
collect, they get.
it's not about whether it's 5 cents or 10 cents or $10. This is the question I want answered. The new situation changed to takes more money out of the citizen's pocket earlier. Is that correct?
When they go to register their vehicle,
Is that
they have to
correct?
pay their taxes. A
But
loophole
it's-
got, a big
but it's-
loophole got closed,
A big loophole got closed.
which is good for us,
When you say good for us, you mean good for the county collecting the money.
and good for other citizens who have been honest and paid their taxes like they should.
All right, the honest citizen who's paid their taxes like they should is also having to pay that, having to get off of that money earlier. Is that correct?
Yes.
That
You pay it
part.
at the time.
That part I am vehemently against as a personal citizen. I want to
You
pay what
gotta
I have
pay
to pay on time, but I do not as a citizen, and I want other citizens to think about what they're going towards, and they need to call Raleigh about this,
Well,
in my
this-
opinion.
Well, this is already set, this is done.
Well, I mean, I know they do
Yeah.
what they want to do, but we just don't always need to accept it because it's already set. I mean, because we can have it unset.
But
If
we-
we are vehement enough about it.
But you know, we
All
requested
I
this.
wanted to know
But I,
was,
you know, we requested this.
Okay.
To be done. The
To be
county-
done?
Yes.
so that you would collect
Counties
that
in North
money.
Carolina asked that this be done. It was supported by 98 counties.
That's right.
There were 2 counties who didn't support.
Mr. Mayor.
No.
I'm just letting you know.
I know,
just
sir.
history,
I
just
understand.
history.
It's just
Sure,
didn't-
just
Wayne
letting you
County
know.
just didn't
Okay,
do it.
Sorry.
But the fact remains is, unless I'm missing something, that 4 months was collected from citizens over North Carolina, whether you were delinquent one time or whether you paid yours up on time. The situation was that the bodies to be will collect 4 months of revenue out of the citizen's pocket that the citizen could have still had, unless I'm missing something.
It's basically a time period of how it was done. It's a changeover to the system, and the state's it's holding those dollars, and then you will collect it. But we knew there was going to be a lapse in actual collections and how they then transferred that, recorded it, and got it to the counties and cited it appropriately.
Thanks, sir.
Mr. Donner and then Mr. Pate.
And maybe Wayne can help me with this, but it's been explained to me that the $1,800 allotment that's been paid by the county to each fire district goes back decades ago, where it was an assistance. And in fact, my understanding is it went back even further than that, before there were even taxes that were being levied, that where fire departments organized and literally had to go out and get donations, had to have pig pigeons and other things in order to raise the revenue to operate the volunteer fire department. And to offset and assist on that, the county so-called donated $1,800 to each fire department. Am I correct on any of this, or am I off?
Mr. Acock?
Initially, most of the fire departments were started in 1958. Most of them was chartered in 1959. Initially, they were getting $900. That was their only source of income from the county, the only source. And just before legislation was passed where they could even have a tax district, expenses were getting greater and greater, so the county opted to double that to $1,800. Well, then in the 70s, I think, is when the tax district started being voted on. The freeholders of each district had to vote that tax in. The fire department couldn't do it. They could get out and campaign for it, but they couldn't do the tax. And all of the fire departments in the county did not go to it to start with. There was some still just getting the $1,800.
Right.
And it was just, it's just always been there. I'm not saying it should stay there, but that was the process that it went through.
Well, and this is one of those fees that comes out of our budget going into the fire departments. And I would just urge us, since they have taxing authority and they have their own revenue source, that we find a way that we truly identify what the costs are to provide fire service. I'm not trying to take dollars away from fire departments here. What I'm trying to do is to have proper accounting. And I understand that it just goes back a long time ago, and I don't think anybody ever questioned it, to be right honest with you. It's been on the books. It's like one of them regulations. It gets on the books and just stays on the books. And I think we need to address that.
Mr. Pate?
Thank you. I'm still trying to wrap my brain around these tax rates, and maybe Wayne can tell me if I'm thinking correctly here, that the smaller the tax base in whatever area, say, well, Pharaoh is a good example, at 8 cents per 100, since it's just a small tax base, is that why theirs is higher than it would be other places that are lower that have, a lot more people on a bigger tax base? Is that the way this thing is working?
Mr. Hickman?
Basically, it is, Mr. Pate. I think by state statute, it can go as high as 15 cents. It was a gentleman's agreement years ago when evaluations was rated at 50%. It was up to 15 cents. It's a gentleman's agreement. I don't know if there's anything in writing in Wayne County, but when the evaluation went to 100%, it's when it dropped to 8 cents. And in Wayne County, 8 cents is max. And naturally, your smaller districts, I'll just use some examples, Pharaoh, Antioch, East Wayne, they don't have the tax base that the larger ones is, and to be perfectly honest, I don't know how they're operating on 8 cents. I mean, because they've got to provide the same fire service as the department that their budget is 4 times larger. But yes, it's basically 8 cents is the max in Wayne County.
Is that set by who?
That's just been a gentleman's agreement in the county.
The board. You have to levy the tax. I mean, they can request whatever they want, but it's the Board of Commissioners that levies the tax.
Well, I had some concerns like, the smaller ones, I got several smaller ones in my area, and I know how they're hurting for money to operate and to be able to perform the job adequately like you just said. So we may have to look at that again. That's just my observation. Thank you.
But by state statute, am I not correct? It is 15 cents.
15
The
cents.
state will allow
You can go, the Board of Commissioners can go up to 15 cents
per 100.
per 100.
Mr. Daugherty?
Well, I mean, let's just graze through here and you'll see that what a disparity there is. Pharaoh has got income of $29,000 to operate a fire station. $29,000. And then we flip over here and we see that Marmax's got over $500,000, $544,000. There is such a disparity here that I think that we have got to find a way to have the proper funding for these fire departments, whether it's through merger or whatever. I mean, I turn around and look at, I look at $500,000 going into one fire district and less than 30,000 going into another.
I got a comment,
All right.
if I can. My comment on that is you have to compare apples with apples, and the disparity, I'm not sure how I could define that. But I do know that if you go to Marmac, and we're not picking on Marmac, it's just that Marmac has gone really up $100,000 because of the Lee plant. And we really don't know what that true figure is going to be until probably September, October. But then you have that district, the way I understand it is that you have the homes and you have the commercial outlay on 117 that they are responsible for. And you look at those property values, and then you come over here and look at a fire department that does not have that commercial ability to go in. They don't have the ability to go in on commercial property and reap the benefits of commercial values. So you really have to be careful that the people that are watching, that you don't say, well, this one department over here is making a killing and this other one over here is poor. You've got to balance it because of our districts. And the other thing is important here is that you only have really 4 line items every department. One is your tax, your tax levy. The other one is your vehicle. The other one is your sales tax, and then of course the other one is the $1,800 the gift or something that we spoke about a while ago, used to be 900, we doubled it to 1,800 as I guess, a gift each year. So we got an agreement. So, when you look at those four areas, you have to define what is the value of the district they're in. Is it rural, or is it residential, or, is it farming, or does it have a 10,000 houses, or does it have millions of dollars in commercial property? The other one is, that I'm concerned about, is the sales tax. If these guys are dependent on sales tax receipts, when our retail sales are down in this county, which they've been declining over the last 6 years with the recession, when you look at attaching yourself to sales tax receipts, then I'm going along with Mr. Pate, Commissioner Pate, is that you do look at avenues to bring in more funds. And what you're saying is, you mentioned the word merger or whatever the survey has indicated that we haven't studied yet. But if you look at that and then look at the sales tax receipts and you have to look at the big picture. So I think the day is we've got all this before us, we have the rates before us, and we have the authority to set the rates. So I just want that's my sort of 2 cents right now on that. Mr. Acock?
Yes, and again, just keep in mind now, these, there's no fire districts anymore. Now, initially, it was fire districts, 3 or 4 years ago, it changed to service districts, but the lines changed very little. They did change from the way the crow flies to property lines, correct?
Yes.
And so that did change them just a little bit.
It did.
But basically, these lines has been in place since 1958. We have no way of controlling residential development, commercial development in this. And yes, there is a need, but these districts have been here for 55 years, and things have changed a lot in 55 years.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Cromartie?
I just want to ask this question. The report that came, the booklet that we got about the report that was done relative to merging some of the departments.
That's the volunteer insurance, was it
VFIS,
Volunteer Fireman Insurance
Services.
Services.
survey.
The VFIS services, it's the survey, Mr. Cromartie,
Right.
that we haven't looked at yet.
Right. Well, and
We haven't
this
studied.
leads to my question. If we have some concern that everyone is not being treated fairly or equitably, will we get to that? Are we going to have a work session or information session on that?
Yes, sir.
With the possibility of merging those groups before we make a decision on them? Can't get there, Miss?
No, sir, I've got the answer for you, Mr. Cromartie. It's July the 16th. We're having a work session on that. It's already we voted on that a couple of.
All right, okay.
July the 16th.
Yes, sir.
William, Mr. Cromartie?
No, I was wondering, and thank you for the date, the update on the date for the, I didn't have that written in front of me. I was just wondering, wouldn't have been beneficial to
Yes, sir. Mr. Page?
look at that before we make it, if there's any change to be made on this, if there's a concern about it, so as to have the latest information in front of us to make the most adequate decision possible. That was my question.
I was just going to make a comment. When we do get to that, we're not there yet, let's make sure that we get the input from the fire chiefs too, because I know they're interested. That's just my comment.
My comment on that is that is in the association. The fire chiefs all belong to the Firearms Association. And that's the earlier comment that was being made, that the fire chiefs and the fire, the fire marshal and the association and all are lined up with, as mentioned by Mr. Mayo, we have a fire commissioner, which is Mr. Wayne Acock. Mr. Acock?
Just keep in mind now, the fire chief is only in charge of fire suppressing. The chairman of the board for the fire departments is in charge of running the business. That's fine for the fire chief to be there, but the chairman of the board of each fire department needs to be included in it also, because they handle the funds.
Okay.
The fire chief does nothing except fire suppression. Now, most of the time, they are ex officio member on the board.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Daugherty?
in the interest of time and time restraints, and in the fact that we do not have the necessary information to really modify or change how the funding and the expenditures are arrived at on fire departments, I would ask that we probably just kick this can down the road, that we do, that we just set this aside, approve those budgets that are in fact recommended to be approved, but that we agree to implement some work sessions to address this over the months ahead, so that come next year, budget time, we can have the necessary information to make some decisions. I'm just saying, I don't think we've got enough time to actually go and bring every fire department in here, go through every one of those budgets, and make some policy changes that may need to be made in this budget year. Just my idea.
And just a thought too.
Just a thought.
Well, just a thought on my end is that we can always, at any meeting, make an amendment to any part of the budget and move funds around from fund balance to, we can do that as we work through. We can always do whatever, but we have to change, if we have to change the rate, that has to be done really today and within. Can't change the
Once you set
rate,
it.
but we can make adjustments to those who might need funds. That's up to us as we go forward, but we don't change the rates. We set the rates at our budget. Mr. Aycock?
Yes, and also, just for information for y'all, I'm gonna say over 90% of the departments, when they started voting, when the freeholders started voting in the tax district, most of them were at 8 cents. There is a lot of departments, and I can't call them all, but there is a lot of departments over the years, as they got in, their tax base got greater and greater, they did come in and ask for decreases. I mean, I can't call all of them, but basically, all of them started at 8 cents.
Well, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir, Mr. Donner?
I agree with that, but just to give you an example, a few weeks back, this board approved a budget amendment in excess of $400,000 of excess revenues that were not budgeted, and therefore were not used in arriving at a tax rate. These were approved as budget amendments that were going into fire departments. So we're looking at a budget here, but we don't have the true picture in regards to the actual revenues received. So we're making decisions based upon not having all the information, and that's my concern. And I would just hope that going forward, that we have a little bit more transparency in regards to what the history is. And as an example, in one department, as I recall, there was over $60,000 additional. Now, here we're looking at a department that operates the whole year on $29,000, but there was $60,000 additional revenue unbudgeted that went to that department. So I think we all will agree that we need to take a long look at this. And I'm just asking that after the budget process that we allocate some time to do so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments? Yes, sir, I have one comment on your, Mr. Daugherty, is that I would like to ask the manager, Mr. Smith,
Yes, sir.
in the past, have we made it the norm to reduce revenue to balance the budget on fire departments? Or have we increased the expenditures to balance the budget?
We reduced the revenue to match the expenditure.
Yes, sir.
And there, I'm sorry, I'm not up there on the table, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
sir. Let's say that.
Shifting things around, I'm sorry. We have in the past reduced the revenue to match the expenditure, because it's got to balance. You have to balance it. If you don't, one's got to go up or down to bring it to center. because we are not in the budgeting process like I am in health, DSS, and OES, and the county manager's office, I can match those. But if I don't have that budget, all I can do is, we collect, is make them match. There's where the over collection comes into play. And it has for 20 years. I mean, when Mr. Ricks was here, when I first got here, and Mr. Sullivan, I mean, that's when first I went, tell me what this is. And they said, well, it was because I had a different type tax structure where I was at before. And they explained it to me, and they were doing it, I think, the right way based on what they had and the information they had. They did the right thing to make them match, but it caused over collection because you have to give those departments what they collect and the sales tax. They are to be paid that. It is their money. It's kind of like the sales tax for schools. Even though it's in reserve, it's their money.
So
It's
how
just a
did
matter of when
you,
you pay it out.
so how did you reduce the revenue to match the expenditures to balance the budget?
We just would look at what they turned in their budget and made the match. We would match the number because there was no other way to do it. I mean, because I have no other information.
So if their budget asks for $100,000 in expenditures, and you collect at the end of the year, over the year, $120,000, what do you do with the $20,000?
Of over collection,
Yes,
write them a check. We do a budget amendment, write them a check before the end of June, hopefully.
and that's what we did last meeting.
Yes,
We had
and
a
you'll
total.
probably have more budget amendments the 25th. Before Pam left, she talked to Marcia and I about having more budget amendments on that day. Because we've since then have collected, we're collecting money every month. So there will be over collections again for them.
And I'm going to say, Mr. Just a follow-up question, if I may, or comment. In lieu of Mr. Comarty's concern about studying the survey, and in lieu of the monies that were paid out and were anticipated to be paid out before the year end, then I would suggest that you probably get the last 5 years to give us a trend of the collections, because one, look at the tax rate going forward, not now, not this time,
Sure.
but next time, like Commissioner Daugherty had suggested. And number two, to take a look at the sales tax receipts and how we have looked at the sales tax receipts, or retail sales or sales tax receipts over the last 5 years,
Sure.
to give us a good trend of the economy and how that's making a place. But also looking at the average dollars that have been paid out at the end of the year in each fire department.
Mhm.
And maybe in the same study, Mr. Clardy, is have a way that we probably look at the budgets of the fire departments. I'm not implying that we take control, I'm just saying have an idea to move forward as looking at the budgets and understanding their needs and where the monies are coming from and how we adjust the tax rates in the future. I don't know, that's all of it in a nutshell, but that's just just the sort of a thought of going forward. Mr. Aycock?
Yes, I'm gonna kind of put county manager and finance in the hot seat now, probably. The fire department budgets, they're not privy to a lot of the information. They depend on the county manager and finance for estimated, on some of it is estimated figures.
That's correct.
And the county has
On the
been
prior
very,
year.
yeah, and the county has been very conservative on the figures that they supply to the fire department. And that's one of the reasons that at the end of the year, there's some surplus there, because they had rather afford to be, well, I can't speak for them, but it's better to have a little over than be under, because if it's under, there's no way to get it from. But they are very conservative on the figures that they give to the fire
When we
departments.
get at that 9-month point, February, March, that's usually when the phone calls are occurring. There are meetings between finance and the tax office. And we actually look at collections from prior years. And particularly when, and I appreciate your comment about looking at years past, then you look at revow. Because there's been other construction, new rates, you got to put all that in there. But we do that, and we go to Alan and David and to Tammy and those folks, and they tell us, here's what we think we'll collect, here's what we did last year, here's what we think, within a point, because there's a percent, and I'm going to get this totally wrong, Board, but there is a point of collections I can't go over. I can't over anticipate.
Whatever you collected last year.
You can't go,
Audit shows.
exactly, audit. So I have to use that and say, there's a mark, because the auditors will catch you on that one. So we do that and we estimate, we make them match. But I mean, all this data you've asked for, we can put it together. Absolutely.
Well, to make Mr. Mayor? Donner?
Here's my concern. There's no checks and balances here. That's my concern. My concern is that if you budget, a person living in a $100,000 home is concerned about how much he pays in taxes. And there's two portions of that. So the fire tax is in fact a portion of that tax that they pay. Now, we look at the budget for everything else. How in the world can a commissioner make a decision of whether or not a 7%, 5 cents, or whatever the rate is recommended is in fact accurate based upon their expenses if we don't have their budgets? And not only that, but a track record of how much money did they actually receive, not budgeted. How much did they actually receive last year, this year, the year before? So, I agree, Mr. Acock, that our finance department, thank goodness, is conservative. But when you conservatively estimate revenues and you miss the mark by 20%, and all of a sudden you've got to pay out because those tax dollars came in, you got to have to pay it to the fire department. Then it's, you see, you have to have a history of what it is, and never, in my opinion, have we actually analyzed it going back with a history of 3 to 5 years of actual dollars going to the fire department. And that's what I'm asking, that we
Sure.
examine that after this budget. We haven't got time to do that
Sure.
in this budget.
And I think
That's
part of
all.
that process started in July, all this, the data you're asking for, we can absolutely put all that together.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Mr. Donner? Thank you. Any others? One last comment on my part is that it's the tax rate that we're responsible for. We are not responsible for the fire departments. They give us the budget. Our finance department has asked me to find some way, and through Mr. Smith, is that in the future, can we get a better handle on the budgets coming in so they can give us better information to determine whether or not the tax rate needs to be decreased or increased. That's what we're looking at. Our finance department does nothing to control the budgets of the fire departments,
Don't want to.
and we don't want to. But again, we can't withhold back or pay over. We have to pay what's due to the fire department according to their rate and their budget that they submitted that we are approving in this work session and for this budget. So I was just, this is sort of a recommendation or not recommendation, suggestion from the finance officer, is that how do we go forward to be better stewards of those funds? The people in Rosewood, that fire service district, they can't control the Lee plant locating on the other side of the river. They have no control over that, but they're affected. And we have to understand that as commissioners, is that what do we do with the rate? How do we work that to the benefit of the citizen to be protected? That they have adequate fire department to do the job. The additional $100,000 that's going to Marmac because of the Lee plant, they had no control over that. But certainly we as commissioners, when we're setting the rate, we have to understand, I think, the whole county and each fire department. Mr. Acock?
Let's vote on Mr. Doherty's motion that we look at this in the future.
That wasn't a motion, but if you'd certainly like to make it a motion, no, sir, that was a suggestion. And if you guys want to pull triggers today, it's solely up to you. You do what you, we certainly can. You want to make that as far as a motion?
The boss is back on your end of the court, Mr. Doherty.
I just hope that I don't need a motion, I just have a general understanding that we have a work session on this.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, suggestions? Okay, are we finished with fire departments? now?
Yeah, we are. Thank
Okay.
goodness.
Okay.
Good.
Good. All right. On page 6 of these, on the revenues, you'll see the EMS fund. You see that, the 5.8?
Ooh.
Ooh, don't get excited, it's all right. The one thing I will say to you, that if you'll look at it this year, is last year we were able, or the fiscal year we're in today, we were able to use some fund balance. We don't have fund balance in there anymore. So we're having to use 100% county funds. So the 5.8 is 100% county funds and fees collected, because we collect a lot of fees. We charge Medicaid, Medicare, insurance companies, and EMS billing brings that in. We do debt set-off. So though I say it's county money, there's fees in there too, okay? And we'll be talking about that as we move into that budget. Your big thing is you didn't have the fund balance to use this year. We've utilized that. Solid waste fund of 3.4 million, the revenue there.
Wait a second.
I'm sorry.
We, Mr. Fay,
I was just wondering about this county capital projects, these lines up here.
all right.
Yeah, those have,
County capital, you want to go to county capital reserve, that's after the,
well, basically, we don't have anything marked for those. Those, basically, they're funds sitting in those reserves. As you pay for those, it doesn't affect the tax rate or your net budget. You would amend, so Pam and I have agreed, we would amend those as you need them. For instance, on the radio system, let's say we got to tweak it here at the end, and you need to pull some money out of the proceeds of the loan that we have of $9.9 million, which is $400,000 or $500,000 sitting there. You would amend it as you need it, but it does not affect the bottom line. That's why it's zeroed out, because we don't know
Previous
what.
years you amended it, and that's why the money's sitting there for
Yes,
the county.
yes.
Okay.
So next year, let's say I use 200,000 on, let's say, the communication system out of that, those loan proceeds for that reserve. Next year, you'd see amended 200,000. Yeah, but it doesn't affect the bottom line right now.
are we on the county capital project radio system, is that where you are?
Yeah, and those are all, just if you look at midway of the page, county capital reserves, all the way down to county cap, just before the EMS fund, all those would be treated the same if you use them. In other words,
Let's back up to county capital project radio
Okay.
system.
okay,
2010 and 11, there was 9,600. And then it was budgeted in 11-12, $1,251,000.
mm-hmm,
We amended that budget to 942,000.
that's right.
Okay, estimated in 2012-13 was 942,000.
Correct.
Now, actual, there's none been spent.
This year, that's correct.
Right.
There's nothing out of it.
So with that,
We haven't spent it out of there this year.
so that's
That was through
right.
the end of February, we have
That-
not.
That's correct. Now,
You may have some in this next 30 days, or through the end of June, but which you'd have an amendment on June 25th if we do that.
okay, as you anticipate, and I use that word very, very conservatively, the word anticipate.
Yes.
We know we have issues with the radio system.
Mhm.
If we anticipate monies going out for the radio system, because it is the project, the capital project,
Mhm.
of I think, $10 million, whatever, 9.8, whatever.
Yes.
Why would you not include any of that in the next year, 13-14?
Because that is part of that gross. If, let's say I spend just $1 of it, I would appropriate at that time from that reserve. If I think, if Lee Smith and Pam Holt think we're gonna spend 250,000, all I'll do is enter 250, enter the 250 reserve, do a transfer, move the whole thing up. Basically, it inflates it. We do it as they come. We amend it as needed out of the reserve. Right now, we don't know what it is. Joe, Blair, Mel, Brian, they don't know. Once they know, once we have bills in hand, we would amend at the time out of the reserve. It will take no additional county dollars out of funds that you will collect this year. Is that clear as mud?
So my thinking then is, it is satisfied on your projection then
Mhm.
of zero under manager and final department.
Mhm.
But I still am a little lost on the year-to-date
Mhm.
actual 12-13 as a
Mhm.
zero.
Yes.
I know that the expenses and so forth have back and forth and followed through the radio system. In fact, I've been on top of that radio system since 2008.
Yes.
And
We use
to
current.
see that there are no expenses for 12, 13, I'm confused that there's a zero there.
Well, okay, remember earlier, we talked about, one of you brought up, I think it was Mr. Belcher, about the purchase order. And a purchase order is setting out there to go up to the, let's just use the 10 million, 9.987, whatever it is. It's setting out there. So it's encumbered up to this 942. So this purchase order has been doing this, it keeps coming down, so I have a balance. So as, let's say they come up, let's say next week I pay a bill for $54,000. I would amend on June 25th for $54,000, and then in this year, in this column next year, you would see $54,000, and a reduction of that 942 would then be 890 something. It would come down. So we are using that as needed, and we amend as needed. We have paid a lot of the bills on the radio system this year. We have paid out of, we actually had budgeted line items to take care of some of these, because we had planned on already, Wayne, we had hoped to have already been in the maintenance stage, so we had some money there. So we really tried to use that, because the money sitting there were for the radio system, not maintenance. So we've tried to use that for equipment and things like that, and really keep it very specific to equipment, because that's what it was for.
But if maintenance was, just a question, Mr. Mayor, if the maintenance wasn't there, wasn't it included in the original contract
No,
No.
no.
for
There was
maintenance?
no maintenance contract.
It was just
No maintenance.
warranty?
Never been a
Yes.
maintenance
It was just
contract.
it was just
That's
warranty
correct.
work?
And we're negotiating
Until
a
the, okay, and we just
maintenance
did.
contract now. Well, we
Right,
have
we just
negotiated a
did.
maintenance contract.
Okay.
So there would be a budget amendment on that, right?
Yes, if we spend any dollars out of that, there would be, you have to, because that's a reserve, and we did that years ago. We set policies in place that when reserves used to, we could spend some of those dollars, chair and the manager, we don't do that anymore. We actually have, when you put it in reserve, I have to come to you as manager and say, may I take the dollars out of that CU, because you control reserves. And it's the appropriate way to do it.
Okay, got it.
Mr. Donnery?
If I'm understanding, this 942,000 was the amounts that was left over, the remaining amount from the original PO issued on the purchase. Am I correct?
Hold on.
No, it hasn't.
Correct. However, we've encumbered on our books the full amount of $9.2 million. I've got $942 left. Now, I have invoices sitting on my desk to be paid that I'm negotiating with the previous company. Budget amendments are coming.
I understand.
Okay.
But my question is, if
Yes.
that's the case of a residual of encumbered funds.
We then will have to decide, because that is from loan proceeds of the $10 million.
I understand.
We have a choice, we have some choices. We could pay off some of it early. In other words, go back to the bank and say, okay, well, we've got $300,000 left, we're gonna pay off in advance. And some of it we can do, but you can only do so much a year, because there are penalties for early payoff. You can go up to, so we may do that over a year or two and pay some of that down. You just put it right back into it and pay it off.
But it's right at $1 million here, and my question is, if it was a carryover for this budget, why are you not carrying that same amount over for the new budget?
You remember,
It's encumbered,
remember, this
still
is the-
there.
This is the revenue.
Understand?
This is not the expenditure. This is the revenue, this is a
But
reserve.
you budgeted it for revenue well, there it is.
Well, it's sitting there. There's a reserve sitting there. But if I've not planned on usage and I don't know what it is, I don't want to estimate usage if I don't know. I will once I get bills in hand, I will do a budget amendment. That's how we've done it. We've never estimated it. We've always said, at the end of the year, how much do we have? What are the bills? And I amend it, because when we did the loan of the $10 million, for instance, you got to separate all the projects out. We had like 5 segments in that project. We had the radios we bought for all the fire departments, for the police departments. By the way, we're the only county in the state of North Carolina that has ever done that. So,
Understand.
okay, ever. Nobody's ever done that. That was a big deal.
But
several
back
million
on this
dollars.
942,
But that's the balance left of that 10 million.
and why would it not be in this year if it was in last year?
It is in there. It's a reserve.
It's a reserve, agreed.
But Joe, let me, Mr. Jalbert, if here, amended budget, for instance, you have in your coffers, okay, $23 million when you get the audit back of of reserve sitting there that don't show up in this audit, or excuse me, in this budget. You don't just put them in there. If you did, it'd be $210 million. But when you put them in there, you've got to apply an expenditure to it. You can't put the reserve in there and not have an expenditure attached. You either have to take one up or bring one down. In this case, we zero it out, amend as needed.
And Mr.
That is an appropriate budget. That is, in the LGC, Local Government Commission say, that is more appropriate. You're not over or underestimating. I'll call
Wait a
Vance
second,
Holloman
Mr.
for
Ford.
it.
Mr. Chairman.
Wait a minute, Mr. Moore.
Okay.
I know what
Let
you're
me clear
thinking,
my
but I'm
thoughts
trying
on what
to.
was-
Yes,
Okay.
follow up.
I'll follow up later.
Mr. Camardi.
I just want to ask a question. You did say we would have
Mr.
amendments when, you did say we would have amendments when needed.
Yes,
And
particularly
then,
on this, yeah.
won't some of
Or any
those,
reserve.
won't some of those zeros begin to fill up and be dollars over there?
Oh, yes.
That's, I just want to make that point. I mean, see, that they'll
When I
become
did the budget
dollars.
last year, it said zero,
When you,
because I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know what invoices I would get on that purchase order. I did not know, so I need to leave it out there, and the auditor, because we brought the auditors on these reserves, and Davenport and Associates. How do I do that more properly? And probably 7 years ago, we started accounting, we've always accounted for them, but I don't carry them in the budget because it inflated it. And we'd say, okay, well, I'm gonna spend 942. Then the year I didn't spend it. Well, then I'd have to amend it, bring it back down. Well, then it became fallout in the general reserve. Well, now the LGC says you, and GASB, which are the new accounting standards, say you can't do that because once you obligated it for communications, you gotta spend it for communications by law. And what the LGC is afraid you're gonna do is put that 942 in there and let something else eat it up.
Mr. Chair.
Mr.
I know this is
Dodd.
confusing.
follow up.
No, it's not. No, it's
Okay.
not. Mr. Daugherty.
Here's the problem I have.
Okay.
Earlier today, we spoke of issuing a purchase order
Yes.
for an item and setting it aside as restricted funds. And that would have to be reallocated in the budget
Or that
if
was
unspent. If unspent,
Encumbered.
it's encumbered, but the point, whatever terminology.
Okay.
If it's encumbered, you would still have to carry it forward. If it has not, if you have not paid it, you would have to carry it forward into the
That's
next
correct.
year's budget. Now, we've already established that. Here's the same thing here, where you had encumbered the dollars on the capital radio system, and you had remaining $942,000, and I don't understand why you would not, in this instance, carry it forward, because it's encumbered, PO was issued, why would you not? Now, agreed, we were talking about a smaller amount before, but this is $1 million, in my opinion, that we need to have in the budget going forward, because you've already issued a PO on it. It's already encumbered.
But we're going to amend after July 1st, once I know, because there are issues within the communication system that have not been clarified.
Then fine, I got no problem. In other words, after the budget is approved,
You're gonna clear this
then
number
we're
up
going
this
to
fiscal
amend the
year.
budget. We're going to amend the budget to include that. That's fine.
Because I'll know more of what it is, because I can't tell you. Yes.
When we automatically close out our accounting software at the end of fiscal year, the purchase orders automatically
Come
roll
over.
forward. And then we do present a one-sided budget amendment to you to carry
In July and
the purchase
August.
orders forward.
I understand,
Yeah.
but why are you doing it in certain instances and not
Oh,
in
no,
others?
it's in all instances.
In all
This one's just like the small purchase order. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's $1 million or $3.
It rolls.
It's all done the same way. None of them will be in the budget. No purchase order. will
But
be
what
in
we're
the
telling you is there are no
POs in.
There are no other POs in effect, and there are no other revenues coming in. See what I'm saying? In other words, all I have is the reserve sitting there. There's no additional $100,000 grant coming to the communication system. There's nothing additional. It's in the reserve.
I won't belabor the point.
Okay.
Mr. Cromartie.
No, sir, I don't have anything else to add. I was just,
All right, we're waving a hand down there. I want you to-
oh, no, I was just.
I'm just saying, hey.
I was just saying, hey.
Okay.
I was, no, I won't ask.
Okay, there were two things that I brought to my mind. One, as you said, early payoff penalties. Really, the practice of this board, since I've been on it, is that we sign no contract if it's got an early payoff penalty, that we arrange that with the bank. And I believe that was the case with this, is that we don't go into anything because that would be a penalty toward the county if we had the funds to pay, that we do not use that, we don't exercise that.
There was some-
We ask for contracts not to include those.
But there was something, years ago, there was something in there, and I think we can do early, that's why I've said payoff, but it's a timing issue, not so much penalty as a timing of the payoff. Now, I think probably that time now is past,
Well-
but it was in that first 24 months, and we're well beyond that now. So what I'm telling you is because we're now 4 years in.
I understand.
And I think that's
Our
a
practice is
non-issue
generally
now.
since our
Yeah.
practice since '08 is not to acquire any loan that
That's
there's a
correct.
payoff penalty,
That's
or early payoff penalty. Okay.
But there was
That's-
something in that for there were like SunTrust, there
Okay.
were like 4 banks. You remember there was something in there, and I
But there was
just, I
no
can't
early
recall.
payoff
Yeah,
penalty that I can remember.
yeah.
Okay, the other one is, I think there lies the rub whenever we move forward, is that we need a book like this. Certainly it'd be nice to have a book bigger than this over here with cash. But if we've got cash over here, and if we've got restricted accounts, which is defined as encumbered, and there's zeros over here that you're presenting us as something that's just not budgeted, then it would be a lot easier for me as a layman to go to a second book of cash, and you've labeled it unrestricted and restricted. So as we go through this process, a month from now, when you send us these budget amendments, you can go to this sheet over here and say, let's go over here where these line items are encumbered, and we deduct this side of the book to match this side of the book, so we don't have this issue next year.
When you look at capital reserves or any reserves that you have, and I'm trying to speak for Pam Holt, and I'm gonna do a very poor job of it. And she's listening. She's supposed to be listening in the hospital with her earphones, so she's listening. So Pam, I'm sorry, right up front. Okay. When I look at, and I hear what you're telling me, cash changes, that changes daily. Okay. Investment, it
Depends on the
collections.
grants, the
That's right.
flow of.
Changes daily.
Sales tax
Now,
receipts. from
what
state.
Pam did just
That's
a
what I
couple
understand.
of months ago, we actually did a list of reserves. And we said, and I'll use the Mount Olive Library, it might not be a good, but I use it. There, it's
It's encumbered.
3.5 million in a reserve, capital reserve, boom, there it is. So you can't touch it, the board can touch it. You would have to alter it, we can't, but you've got it set aside. Then you have certain percentages or certain budgets of certain articles of like sales tax. Even though it's in our books, we can't really use it. So she really is doing that, and she puts that in that. Now, she can update that report that she gives you, that financial, and that's probably what we need to expand. She and I've talked about how we expand that for
No,
her.
we've asked her to come every quarter.
Yeah.
And do that, she's doing that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying for the benefit of us to know the cash that we have on hand, Mr. Smith, is that we have a list. The rub is that there's so much encumbered or over here restricted. There's so much cash available that we can't touch.
Sure.
And then there's so much cash that we can get. But then when we look at the budget, and then we have budget amendments, which
Yep.
generally indicate an increase somewhere, whether it's givings
Sure.
and revenue or expenditures, then we're going to hear encumbered or it's not encumbered. Let's just go over here and see what we've got in cash.
We can do that.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
We can do that.
Mr. Donner.
Can we move on to another item there? Because I've got a question in regards to capital reserve.
We go to the next one. Yes, okay.
And we had it on radio system, but we've got zeros out here, so we are not going to have any budgeted dollars for improvements, capital improvements. Am I correct here? We're not going to budget anything for any school capital improvement or county capital improvement, we're not gonna budget anything.
Anything that will be considered in your long-term capital plan, which is that 5-10-year plan, you would amend as needed. Now, what I'm projecting this year, or my recommendation so far, is that this budget, my recommended budget, is not impacted by any of those things in the next 12 months, including schools. Even my reading the article about the school meeting the other night, and I've met with Dr. Taylor, he came by and brought me some information yesterday, the day before. I still don't think it's going to hit this year, because it will take you, no matter what the process, 9 to 14 months at a minimum to design, state construction, and based on Norway and Eastern Wayne and our experience of expediting that,
Right.
took 4 years. And that was getting free money.
And we had the plans available, or we wouldn't have been able to acquire the money because the 15 million fell out in a
It still
grant,
took 4
and
years.
we had 20 days to make a decision, and because we had the plans already
Yeah.
on the shelf, we were able to submit those two plans.
We can commit and say, okay, we're going to do this capital project, this capital, we can do that, but I don't think it's going to, my feeling, and Pam and I've talked about it, and I talked to Davenport on the phone yesterday and the day before, that it really won't hit our books this year. So it doesn't hit the budget, okay? So those reserves, so we report to you in the next report on of capital reserves, we would say, okay, now, the board just voted to build a warehouse. You know, I'm just making something up, just so, something we've not talked about, and we're not gonna build.
I appreciate that.
But we're building a records warehouse for whatever. So you're gonna build this 50,000 square foot, I'm trying to put some middle ground here. But you build this, you know, it's $100,000 capital reserve, and to get the design, everything, it's gonna be July 1st next year. But what I would say is in our audit, we say to our auditors in LGC, $1 million for this building is planned, and you restrict it in a project ordinance or a capital reserve out of that and move it to a line item like this of its own.
So, yeah, and that's why I have brought this up.
Sure.
Because there are many people that are going to be watching this and listening to this, and there'll be articles in the paper.
Mm-hmm.
This in no way is reflecting any decision that is being made in regards to capital improvements for the schools or for the county or for anything. That's off of this budget.
That's right.
In addition to this budget.
Any capital that you will find in the budget this year, per my recommendation and the staff, because I've cut a lot of capital out this year, a lot. It is within the current expense budget. 581.
It'll be in facilities or something like that.
540, you'll see those as we walk through.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I mean, you see a bunch of zeros, and you say, well, they're not planning to do anything,
Good,
but it's addition to this, separate.
But had I added it, there wouldn't be a zero there,
Understand.
because I'd be hitting that reserve.
Thank you,
But
Mr. Chairman.
You're on
Thank you,
the
Mr. Donner.
Okay.
The next item would be,
EMS down there, because these are all
Yes.
kind of the same.
if that, whatever the, oh, by the way, I have one question on QSCAP
Yes.
project. It came up yesterday that quoted 181 million, the budget. Was the 15 million included in that 181 that we got from QSCAP? Or was that the previous year?
It actually was placed in the budget the previous year, but it carried over because they were drawing funds down, so there was some carryover within this fiscal year. But
Okay.
it actually was in the prior year and the year before.
Yeah.
It carried over for 3 fiscal years.
Okay. I got a phone call last night again, an individual asking they had read that it was 181 million. Here again, it's not fluff, it's the difference between the net and all the monies that go into the
Pass-throughs.
account,
That's right.
pass-throughs.
Yep.
And I was, they asked me, was that the 15 million for the Norway?
There's some of it in
But-
there.
and-
As
yeah.
the school board requests money out of their reserves,
Sure.
it pushes that
Sure.
180 up. Every time they
Right.
do it, it pushes it up.
Right, right,
But then it draws my cash down. But
right.
that's on the books, not budget, because you have to separate by law. and you're not gonna like this, Mr. Daugherty, but the way the LGC and the state statutes are set up, we have a budget, and then we have accounting. And the LGC will say, that's real nice, and you have to budget within these confines, but it's this accounting and audit that we care about.
Sure.
I agree.
This is a guide.
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
The ordinance you set is the official document, and I will give you generic numbers, because you as commissioners can take that 120-some million, that 180 you can't because it's pretty set, it's pass through. That 121, you can move it all over you, wherever you want.
Right.
That's your choice.
You know, we understand that, and just want to make sure that the public understands that, because there are some that would lean for perception that we're
Yes.
spending a ton of money, when in fact, you know, we're not. And we're just doing what LGC and taxpayers
And
want.
the statutes require,
Okay.
that's right. When you hit the, after the reserves, you see the EMS fund, that's that 5.8, or 5,854,000. That's, as I stated a while ago, that's all the revenues that you will see this year, which include county tax dollars of around $1 million.
Where are you now?
EMS fund,
Okay,
third from the
got it.
bottom.
Okay, gotcha.
And about $1 million. You still are cash from the county. You are still spending less today on a paid system, though this budget is more. You're spending, as county dollars, you were spending close to $1.5 million 12 years ago. You're spending right at $1 million of local tax dollars. Though your budget's 5.8 million, you'll see in all, you're spending less today than you were in local with the volunteer system, with paramedics on board. I don't know what kind of comfort that gives you, but the comfort it gives me is I got paramedics on board in all of my trucks. That gives me some comfort if I have to call 911. And we committed to do that, to try and keep that low, and it's tough.
So you're saying we're spending less?
Yes. We're still spending less than we were 12 years ago of county tax dollars. We're still, even though that budget's up, we collect Medicaid, Medicare, Blue Cross,
Right.
all those things to get that other 4.8 million is our fees.
Well,
Mr. Chair.
that's a little different than what was said in our presentation from that department, is that things were, cost and all were going up, everything was going up. But now you're saying, make sure I understand this. that
You're
we're
still
paying-
under that 12-year mark. You're still under that. But what I'm saying, we're starting to hit it. And we made a commitment to stay there, but I don't know how long we can stay there because of issues that you brought up earlier about people calling up and writing. It's getting tough.
All right, Mr. Daugherty.
Well, if I flip back over on the EMS fund on the revenues of 5.8 million, and I
Yes.
flip back over to page 419,
Revenues?
Which are the revenues?
Detailed revenues. Okay,
for the EMS fund,
yeah.
it is indicating under transfers from 110, 2.44 million. So $2,447,216 is budgeted of transfers from 110, which is transfers from the county. So I'm not quite understanding why you're saying 1.2, 1.1 million or whatever, when
Well-
actually it's costing, and a little bit before we get into explanation, if you'll note there, we had in the past 500,000, 500,000 transfers from 110 in 11, 500,000 in 12, budgeted in 11, 12,
Yeah.
500,000. Actual was 712. That has gone up dramatically by almost $2.5 million that we're, so, and if I'm understanding, you were saying you were using reserve funds or
Yes.
fund balance before, but we've exhausted those, and so this year,
You
we're
still
having
have some,
actually
but you're
funded.
close.
So what I'm saying is, it appears to me as if it's costing the county taxpayer right at $2.5 million.
It is, but when you look at the funds we collect, the Medicaid dollars that we receive on our casino, you look at the top, you got the EMS Federal Medicaid Enhancement, you've got that at 540.
Right.
You got the EMS user fees.
Right.
When you look at all the monies we collect, because we collect money on our side, you're still at that mark of 12 years ago, you're pretty close to still meeting that commitment. Now, it's going up. Now, next year, I think I'm gonna break the glass ceiling because the costs continue to go up. But what I'm telling you is within 110, and what we used to spend, and this goes back 12, 13 years ago, even at that 2.4, the dollars that we spent, and this was of our money that we spent of sales tax, property tax, you're still pretty close. But now, we increased $1 million or so, but we were still using fund balance, that type thing, a year or so ago, which was still 2.4 million. See what I'm saying? Even though I know I'm up. So what I'm telling you is, you're still there, but I'm telling you, this year and next year, you're gonna break the glass ceiling. It is gonna cost you more.
Well, I would just encourage in some way that we have got to increase our revenues over than just going to fund balance or going to 110. We're
Yeah.
going to have to find some way to offset the cost because this really is starting to be a real drain. I mean, 2.5 mil from 110,
It's tough.
that's tough.
It is tough. And they told me they did a presentation, they're struggling.
Yeah, I mean, that's gone up fourfold, 400%.
And when
from
folks
what-
want to charge me a laundry, it's really tough.
You're right.
Hospital board
My
member.
problem.
Hospital board
All
member.
right, but anyway, I just want to point out that if you break down this 2.5 is coming from county dollars.
It's expensive. Yep. But you got a good service.
Thank
Well,
you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Donner.
So-
I don't think anybody says that we don't have a good service now. I think we all agree on that. But I am concerned also, when you budget 2 years ago, $500,000, and you budget last year, $500,000, and you look this year, it's 2.5 million. I mean, there's $2 million that went up that has to be transferred. And you gave us a printout sheet of 110 charges, and all of those that come out of 110, this- with the yellow strip down here
Yep.
that you gave out. And I was looking at these 110 shifts and how much were paid out of the count 110. But it's literally just full of transfers at 9810, of 911, well, EMS, 56.8, and then you have EMS at 622 down here, 3 remount ambulances versus 2 ambulances, maintenance and repairs to vehicles. I know we're having issues with 250 vehicles in the county and trying to get a arm around that, something that we'll be talking about shortly, or at least Monday. But it's a lot to absorb $2 million when you've been used to budgeting $500,000 a year for the last 2 years. And then you look at the way that the state is cutting and health care, and then you just look at EMS. And I understand, I rode the rescue, and I know a lot of calls, you go out there and they just don't want to be taken. It is a call for thinking of that they overdosed and they didn't or whatever, but they go. You've got to go. That's by law, you got to go.
Sure.
So, you know, Mr. Smith, really, but $2 million. And that's not revenue from the state. That's revenue, that's county tax
That's
dollars.
local dollars.
That is county
Sure it is.
tax dollars. And we're looking at revenue today. And that's why before we even got into expenditures, I wanted all the commissioners to understand this is where the money's coming from. It either comes from the federal government, the state government, or comes from the county tax dollars.
Yep.
And this is county tax dollars, and this is $2 million above what we paid last year and $2 million above what we paid the year before.
Well, it's a little bit false, though, because we were using
How
the
can-
fund balance, and using that fund balance that was created and was building.
It's not a false, that's the wrong word to use,
Well-
because it still comes from county tax dollars.
That's right, but that's what I'm saying. It really is, when you looked at what we pulled out, $1 million or so out of the fund balance that was created by that area, we really were injecting short of like $500,000 of that amount. I'm not saying it making it less or better or worse. I'm just saying you were transferring, in fact, if you look at the transfers, you were transferring that out of there, and you were able to survive. But now you can't do that anymore because it's not there. It's not building because of issues that you talked about earlier. It's killing us. It's getting expensive.
Just follow up
Mr.
on
Donner.
that. That indicates to me that at one point we were making dollars, we had positive revenue over expenses in that department to build a fund balance. And somewhere along the line, that has shifted now to where we're actually losing money, supplementing it from our reserves, and now we've exhausted the reserves. I think my question is, in that department, what are we going to do to change the policy? We've got to change something, or we're going to end up getting further in the hole. You can't continue doing the same thing and expect different results.
Agreed.
So we're going to have to make some changes here, because that's
Agreed.
a major shift.
And I will say, without getting into the whole works of it, I think absolutely, as a board or as a group, and Mr. Aycock kind of leading that charge, sitting down with the EMS folks and looking at, for instance, where we said we will give a guarantee of an average of response time of X, we may have to say, well, we can do 10 minutes, we can't do 8. Because that couple minutes is a big cost of what you can and can't do. Or we're not going to expand, or instead of, we're going to do one paramedic and one EMTI. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do, and we're going to have to look at it. I absolutely agree, and they know that, and they said that we're because it is getting more expensive every day, not every year, every day, including long.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments from commissioners? Next line item.
Okay. Solid Waste Fund, that's the $3,414,028, and that's solid waste, that controls that enterprise.
Any questions on solid waste fund?
One question.
Yes, sir, Mr. Bay.
Well, there's a big difference between what they asked for and what we gave them. Why do they ask for so much?
Because of, now when you get into the expenditure side, you will see that I have cut some of the capital. Now, they were going to use, and this is what I'm proposing to the board and to Tim this year, there are a couple pieces of large equipment that we need to buy or do rework, and Wayne's been out there and seen, they saved us $400,000 or $500,000 on a piece of equipment doing a rework with Caterpillar, which is great, or it's a Caterpillar piece of machinery. But what I've done is reduce that capital. As we need that machinery, we're going to pull it out of reserve. So instead of inflating that and showing, $1 million out of reserve because they have money there, I've taken that down and said, as you need it, bring it to the board. And we'll bring them to you individually. And that time I will amend the budget and bring those items to you, and that will come out of the capital reserves for the landfill. Doesn't affect the 110 budget at all. Okay, so I've just reduced that.
All right, thank you.
If you would, that's a good time now to explain the capital reserve, because the commissioners in the past set a rule, 8% of the net has been put over to the side, and then the 8% and above, there was a 14%.
Correct.
And between the 8 and 14%, that money was set aside for capital reserve. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's where the money would come from. Okay, that again is an area of the special book, we're going to call it. And I can make a motion to make that a special book. But that book here has got to indicate that there's an 8%, this is the cash that we've got, then 14% is what the board set at. You've got a difference between 8 and 14% that's for capital improvements. 3 months down the road, if it's not in here, like Mr. Pate, it's been reduced, and you're going to come 3 months later and say, we need to do it a budget amendment, comes from the capital reserve, then the commissioners can look over here and see that page and say, oh, okay, we've got $15 million there. Or we don't have but $1 million there. So again, that's just to support my comment a few minutes ago, is listening to what you're saying about how this protocol is that we have to have an indication of what is in that account month after month. So when you do come to us with those improvements that you want to make,
now this
then
year,
we know where the money is.
This year, Ms. Holt and I are recommending within this budget that we not do the 14%. We will not hit the 14% this year.
What's that?
We will not hit the 14% mark this year. In order to hit the 14%.
Well, I'm glad I brought that subject.
Yeah. In order to hit, well, that was part of where I was going on when you look at the county capital reserve, because it's a policy, it's a rule that you guys can set or not do. I'm going to cut that, we're cutting that you got your required by law 8%. That's a done deal. But when I cut capital to make the budget balance to get the net budget down, to be able to get our operations down, to be able to reflect a lower rate. We cut operations and we cut capital. When I cut capital, I cut the 14%. So we will not be within that policy this year.
What are you gonna have?
But that's a choice.
What are you gonna have?
I couldn't even give you a percentage. I don't even think, that's part of what we're running with Davenport to see where we'd be exactly. You're gonna have some pay-go capital this year. Now, if you base it on the amended budget of next year, I think you're probably gonna be in that 11 or 12% by the end of the fiscal year next year. I don't think you'll hit 14 unless I'm full. I don't think you'll hit the 14%. I don't think.
No, but our revenues will certainly exceed our expenditures,
Yes.
but you're just now having to work on our percentage, okay?
Yes. So and now I'm trying, but I couldn't even guess what that would be.
Okay.
For instance, if even though, and I'm back to the library again, Mount Olive Library. If the board says, okay, we're gonna build that, July 1st, you say build it. You'll come real clear because you've obligated out of that reserve of hitting your percentage. See what I'm saying? It's because you moved it over here, you'd come near hitting capital reserve, because for that year, you're gonna come real close to using it and hitting that 12 to 14%.
Sure.
Depends on what you put in there.
Sure. You just want to know what it is.
Mhm.
And we
And
can pull it
and
out.
we can do that,
How it
absolutely,
affects
absolutely.
it. Mr. Daugherty?
I want to make sure there's a clear understanding here, because I don't think this board has dipped into reserves in any way since I've been on the board. So for you to state that we are dropping from below 14%,
I'm recommending that.
I understand.
Yes, I'm recommending,
But
Lee
what I'm,
Smith is recommending.
what I want to make sure that we, that's confusing the way you've put that.
Okay,
And I think we need some clarification here.
okay,
Because the 14% that you're referring to is a capital reserve, has nothing to do with the 14 or 15% reserves that's mandated, as 8% that's
8% is
mandated
mandated by law.
by law.
Yes.
But the 14% doesn't have anything to do with that.
Nope, that's
So we want to make
totally our
sure,
option.
that's correct. That's totally separate.
That's right. There's no law behind that 14%. It's purely our choice. And when you install in your budget use of funds for any capital project in a budget year, you could, for instance, if you did a big, build a big landfill cell or something this year, big item, you push that way up there and you hit that mark. You push it up because you're using dollars and you actually are accounting for it. But this year, we're saying, in order to get everything back down where it should be, no. I'm saying I wouldn't necessarily go hit that policy this year. And I talked to Davenport to make sure, and they said it'll be fine. They don't think it will affect us bond rating wise, and I feel very comfortable with it.
So we're going to have a Davenport report hopefully Monday.
Well, you're gonna have the first sheet from them, and then we've got to work on the assumptions from there.
Thank you, Mr.
Yep.
And with that, just for clarity, 8% set by the state, but this commission in the past has set a rate of 14%.
That's right.
To exceed the 8, go to 14.
That's right.
And the difference was for capital improvements. And of
Yes.
course, at one time, you look at what we have that is encumbered and not restricted.
Yes.
Then you could have as much as 27 or 28%.
Correct.
Or, exceeding 14% up to 30%.
Yes.
And there's been a few times this past
You
year
get like 32. I
at
think.
32%.
Yeah.
So again, when you start talking money every month, then go to your special book and you can sit down and balance it.
And watch it come down. As you watch it come down and watch those rates
That's
go,
correct.
percentages do this business.
That's correct.
Yes.
And that's what the
You're
whole
right.
thing is, what we're looking at, clarity. So the board
Absolutely.
will understand month after month what you have, so when these big ticket items come to
So
our
you know what you
plate,
got to spend.
thank you.
Yep, I agree with you.
Any other? Any other?
And one final follow-up.
Mr. Daugherty.
I do need a copy of your book when you get it.
Special book, I think everybody's gonna get one.
I look forward
We'll
to
start
it.
with a special page and you can add to
Okay,
it. Okay?
we okay on the sewer?
Yeah, the sewer fund, I will tell you, we estimate that based on usage. I will tell you, we see fluctuations in this in rainy times, but I will tell you, Milford and his folks are doing a really good job trying to put in new meters, so people aren't sending me rainwater that I have to pay for. If you use our sewer system, you're gonna pay for use of the sewer system, and we're cleaning that up now. So, but I also mentioned this morning, Milford, that we will be probably using some of our reserve funds this coming year because we do have some repairs at Genoa we're gonna have to do, so.
We have some, what I consider major things.
Here, stand up to Mike just for a minute.
I think we have some major, well, I don't think, I know, we've got some major money to spend that, if you remember, our sewer permit had expired. We brought about some technical inspections. One of the things that came from those inspections is we've got to improve our CIP program for our distribution system. That's going to cost us some money in spare pumps. Those pumps could be anywhere from $2,500 for some of them $10,000. But the permit mandates that. We've got to have a way to be more reliable so that we don't have sewer spill, is what they're saying, okay?
Are you going to bring this sewer issue up through facilities? Or are you going to designate this as another area that you want to outside the facilities?
I don't know, I would ask permission to let Milford and I, and maybe the chair and vice chair talk about that, and if we can, and just see, I can see validity on both sides of that, but I almost think on the utility piece, it might need to be separate.
Because you have a utilities commission, and this is sewer, and
The utility commission is all the municipalities though, and they really don't,
But they service, but they
but
the
they don't have any
capacity, that's
decision-making on our,
That's true.
yeah, I see what you're saying, but I'm just saying, our,
Okay.
Yeah,
But
you
let's
see what
get
I'm
back,
saying?
okay, back to the question, and I guess to make it simple, the sewer issue. Do you want to bring it under facilities, or do you want to
I mean,
move it
we
to
can.
another?
I mean, I don't see why
Because
not.
of expenses?
Yeah. Because finance is there, we can do that, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all
Or we can
right,
just do reports when we do the meetings.
okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because you're looking at revenue of 400, now you're talking about an expense, and when we get into facilities, I didn't know if you wanted him to carry into that, or do you want to bring that out on another?
Well, some of that, we'll be getting estimates over the next couple of months, and we've got $1 million in a reserve built. And in fact, that's part of the deal, is that we needed to make sure we built a capital reserve for sewer, and we would pull that out of that reserve. And then we will amend the budget, because, and like I said the other day, it could be $2,500 or $10,000 for one of these spare pumps.
Okay, okay.
And he's getting all that together now. It's gonna be July, August,
Okay,
before he's got it.
Just another item on our special
Sure.
books. Mr. Daugherty and then Mr. Mayo. Are we okay? Yes, thank you, Milford. Mr. Daugherty, Mr. Mayo.
Well, my concern, again, is the revenue. And if you'll look on the sewer, is total revenue of $400,913, and then if you'll flip back over here in your book to page 422, again, we seem to be going backwards here because we're taking out of earnings $128,000. So it's the same principle here that we were using in EMS. We had built up dollars in a reserve fund or account balance, whatever you may want to call it, and then they supplemented the budget from those funds to that we finally exhausted them, and now we are having to ask the county tax dollar payers to pay the difference. And we're doing something very similar here. We do have, I think Mr. Smith said we had a little over $1 million in that fund that had built up, but we're using to supplement budget $128,000.
There's no money from 110 going to that fund.
There's not. It says earnings appropriated.
Everything is from that fund,
From what fund?
sewer fund. It's
I
and
agree.
it's total enterprise. So it's not like EMS. EMS is hitting 110. I may have to bring it over to 110 to pay it, but there are no general
No, my
local tax dollars
comparison
paying for
there,
sewer.
my comparison here was we were balancing the budget from other funds, whatever they may be. And here, this coming from earnings appropriated.
Yes.
From their earnings,
Mhm.
from prior years, we reduce the rates, and we're, rather than keeping the rates to break even on the sewer, we are actually taking dollars from that fund to balance it out. And I don't understand why we would do that. Why would we not charge the user the cost to the county for the sewer?
It is.
And reflect it in the rate.
Within the enterprise, that rate is paying for that. It is paying for it. And now Pam does it the way she does it, but I'm telling you, the rate for sewer pays the bill plus builds that capital reserve to do the things that Milford needs done.
Well, it makes me heartened to see that you couldn't even understand this, if you're saying that Pam does it
She
the way
does do that. That's what I'm just telling you. We have to do this little magic with this
But
sewer
when you
fund.
read it, it says you got two sources of revenue. One is from user fees,
Yep.
$272,500, and the other is from earnings appropriated. That means it's coming from another fund.
No, it's still coming out of the sewer fund.
It's coming out of the sewer savings account fund,
Reserve.
whatever you may want to call it.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is, what I would think that you would have the entire revenue coming from the user fees,
Here's the thing.
just to break even.
You are, but I was building the reserve sewer fund at a rate that I need to slow that down. So basically, if you're seeing your cost increase, and eventually that line's gonna touch of what your cost and what your fee, it's gonna touch. But Pam knew she was able to pull out enough out of that reserve because it's still building slightly to pull that out and still balance it. See what I'm saying? You're all right.
I'm
It's not gonna
hearing
get
that
any-
we've got some major improvements we've got to put in our sewer, and
And we've done that before.
And we're going to have to bring it out of that fund, is what I'm
Yes.
trying to say, and I
And that
don't
fund
want you
is
to
building
deplete that
this year.
fund.
And that fund is building this year.
Okay, good enough.
I
That'll
think
be
you're
in your
fine.
special book, Mr. Daugherty.
All right.
It'll be in there.
How much do you say we had in reserve?
That'll be in our special book. Well,
You have to wait for your
I know,
We don't know.
But they just gave.
We'd have to look, but I mean, it's over $1 million in there.
Okay, I heard something about 1.2.
It's 1 point something. I
Okay.
can't remember exactly.
Okay,
Yeah, it's on the list to go in the book.
okay. Going in the book.
In the book.
then we have, from sewer fund, we will move to
EMS.
these last five, and then get to our total, and then we'll break for lunch.
Okay.
And then we'll take about a 30-minute break for lunch, and then we'll come back.
EMS net. That's the revenue you see that we're anticipating of $1.276 million.
This is the fund, this is a enterprise.
Enterprise.
It's falling off. Isn't it falling off?
Well, you've looked at it, you look at the actual, for instance, in 2010-11 was 137, then 123, and then when you look at estimated this year at 116, some of it has to deal with when you purchase equipment, those type of things, it inflates that budget. We have to anticipate what revenue we think we can, because we can draw down, Medicaid dollars in that fund. But here, we're saying this is, in doing the calculations with OES and the net, that's a pretty accurate figure. And this helps support the EMS side. Obviously, it's the backup for EMS.
And, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Daugherty.
And again, in that fund, if you'll flip over to 423, it's earnings appropriated, where $121,000 is coming evidently from prior earnings in order to balance out. I mean, I assume that earnings appropriated means that would be their prior earnings and their fund balance that we are in fact transferring over. how much, can you give us how much we have got in our earnings account on that, Wayne net, EMS net?
Well, it does raise a flag, Mr. Smith, because there was nothing in 10, 11, and there was not anything budgeted in 11, 12. And there's year-to-date actual this year is 0. And then you do come up with 121,000 this year. And why wasn't it indicated over the last 3 years?
That's true. They're actually buying a new ambulance this year in that department. That was actually.
But this is
my
revenue, not
recommendation.
expense. This is revenue.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but I had to reflect the revenue and use of those reserves also to be able to reflect the purchase of that vehicle, which is $100,000 and some outfitted, isn't it? Whatever the amount was. But we actually had to reflect that, because obviously I have to balance that enterprise. I mean, I
So
have
there
to
was
make
no
a
way
balance.
there was no pickup from Medicaid, no grant? This
Not
was
on that
just something
unit.
that taxpayers?
Mhm.
So
We can get it out of our charges. In other words, as we charge,
Right.
we get it back. But we
User
can't-
fees.
Yes.
So it couldn't come out of user fees.
Mhm.
It had to come out of this earnings appropriated.
That's right, has to.
And how much was in that earnings appropriated fund?
I'd have to pull that. I mean, I don't have it right here in the budget. I mean, I gotta pull that
They
up.
do make a profit, but it's very minimal.
Mhm.
I mean, they do make a profit, but it's not enough to buy heavy equipment
No.
like that.
Mhm.
Right.
So they would have to take it out of their fund balance in order to buy.
Out of their reserve.
Well, can you get the balance? for
Yes.
them?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
We're gonna pull that.
Yes, Mr. Haycock.
But even though they got to take it out of their fund balance and they are making a profit, the life of the truck, over the period of years, we'll get it back.
Yes, and we also plan to do that. We actually, every year said we would try to earn a little money. In other words, we wanted to make at least $1 to put in an account, so when it was time to buy an ambulance, we could pay so much for it, instead of saying, I need to spend, everything that year. I wanted to have some capital to be able to pay. It's kind of like landfill. We keep money in that landfill, that enterprise account, to be able to pay for when a new sale comes up, cash, because you don't borrow money on those things. Many years ago, we used to lease and borrow money for vehicles, and we got away from that and said, I don't pay interest on that. I'd rather save a little money and have cash to pay, and we built these reserves, and that's how we did it.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
the practice is good. It's just
Yeah.
been a special book, right?
It's in the special book.
Okay, we'll just go
It's in
over there
the
and
blue
find
book.
out
Wait,
whether
blue.
the reserve is a good question. I mean, what have you got in the fund balance? If
That's right.
if each one of these line items have a fund balance,
book.
what is the fund balance?
Follow-up.
Mr. Daugherty.
I think most of you know that we're trying to increase the number of calls handled by Wayne Net here in Wayne County. Wayne Net actually is a profit center and offsets some of our other costs. We all saw about $2.5 million in costs to operate EMS. And, you've got a limited way of collecting those dollars, either they're collectible or they're not type of thing. But with Wayne Net, those are easier to collect. And I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that here in Wayne County, the commissioners have the authority to establish who will provide that service. And currently, we have not, in the past rather, we have not exercised our authority to limit that to Wayne Net. We are hoping that the providers here in Wayne County will use Wayne Net more, because the more they use our services, the more revenues we have to offset our costs. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware that we may have to play a little hardball going forward to make sure that the county tax dollars and our investments, that we in fact do have more revenues on Wayne Net. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Daugherty. Mr. Smith. Any other questions on that?
Okay.
Airport?
Yes, you'll see that 738,069. Changes in the airport budget depends on the projects that we receive when we get the Vision 100 money, and also we get the federal and state dollars for projects. For instance, this past year that was up. Remember, we had the lighting project. This coming year, we're moving into the fuel, make sure I'm saying the right, fuel farm project. So you're seeing those up this year because of the introduction of that project this year. So you've got Vision 100 monies, you've got the state aviation dollars, and you have county dollars. And that would be a total of 738,069 at the Jetport.
Any questions? Airport?
Only one comment.
Mr.
on
Dodd.
that. And I have to go into revenues to point this out, but if you will look on page 424, transfers from 110, it appears to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the airport is self-sustaining with the exception of $40,173 to be budgeted from the county.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the cost to the taxpayers
Yes.
in Wayne County is down to $40,173. Now, that's the Jetport.
That's correct.
And in comparison, I think in your budget, on the airport for Mount Olive,
Yes.
if I can just quickly flip
think
over
we put
there,
in
it was
28,000.
$28,000.
See, and I did that from memory.
So you did that from memory. So even though there may be some concerns, I think that's a fair reflection of appropriating dollars. $28,000 to Mount Olive and $40,000 to our Jetport. I think that's commendable. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
If you remember, we just had a budget amendment for the airport, based on the fuel usage is up,
That's correct.
big time.
Big time.
And
Just
that's
do
what
it.
we want.
That's right.
We
We hope it'll be breaking even next year.
Well, that's why this fuel farm is so critical, that we can also get
That and self-service.
self-service.
That's right.
It's gonna be, if we play this right, the airport, in a year or so, a few years, should be self-sustaining. That's what our goal is.
Appreciate it.
Any other comments?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Next is law enforcement separation allowance, and that is a allowance for that's required by law for us to set aside. You want to?
It allows law enforcement officers to retire at a certain time, and then you pay the difference in their retirement and what they would get in Social Security benefits. That's
Mandated.
It's mandated. And so we do a cost calculation on who may go, when, and we have to have the money in place. And the auditors help us with that.
Question.
Mr. Mayor?
Why is there a zero there for this year? Somebody retired or? See that?
Yeah, I just think it's just not estimated at the end of the year. It actually would go by the,
Well, we probably just
Estimated.
had not made the,
Check.
the budget amendment until after February.
yeah.
Okay.
So it would have reflected zero around
Yeah,
this.
sure, somebody's left earning.
Oh, yeah, but until we do that amendment, it doesn't show up.
And you've got people that left earlier that you still pay.
Yeah. So we have to have money to do both,
Well, that's the actual column too, so we probably just haven't done the entry.
probably.
Just haven't done the entry.
Okay. Now, you have workers' comp self-insurance fund. That's at 543,172.
For both of those two, Mr. Smith, just workers' comp, self-insurance fund, hospital self-insurance fund,
Yes.
who handles those two departments?
The health insurance, I am health administrator. I actually administer the health program. And the HR department handle all the paperwork that goes through claims, that type thing, through Blue Cross. But I'm actually the plan administrator. I have to sign off on everything. Same thing with workers' comp.
Sure, I just wondered why.
But they handle all the
there was-
paperwork for me.
Right.
Yep.
That's why there are zeros there from the department indicating nothing, and then you've come up with.
Same thing as Janice just stated about doing those amendments, but during the year, what happens is they reflect a revenue on this side, we actually collect, because, and I think for people listening, people watching, this is important, because we're self-insured. If we were not self-insured, what I would have is on the expenditure side, you would see a higher number, because I would be paying a Cigna or a Blue Cross or a Key Risk or someone else to do it and pay it. So you have to cover it all. But for us, we build a reserve and try to keep it down in that we control our own program and control our own destiny. So far in bidding that out, we've had this conversation on workers' compensation. I used to be, when we got here, with the Association of County Commissioners pool program, and I'm sure they hit you up every time you go. Nice program. Cost me more money. I can do it cheaper on an annual basis. Still, when we run the numbers every February, we look at it. I'm still under on the health insurance fund and workers' comp self-insurance fund on both of those without being in the association pool or going out for bid. When we put it out for bid, we were still under what it was costing us as a county. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Kumar, I'm sorry, Mr. Donner. Apologize.
I don't want Mr. Camardi down there on the other end.
No, I'm sorry.
Upset me as we can see, these insurance costs are going up.
Yes.
And our county should be faced with a similar thing that every family and every small business and every large business is facing, and that is the cost of insurance. That is an increase of $1.1 million over last year. And these costs, I'm assuming if you're budgeting a revenue of that you're budgeting your expenses to be that. You wouldn't increase the revenue unless you had increased expenses. My concern is, are we in fact analyzing our hospitalization policy? Are we making adjustments, as most other industries and companies and families are having to do, of changing our deductibles, changing our coverages, changing whatever in our program to reflect today's market? $6.7 million, and even though it's a self-insurance fund,
Sure.
and even though we're assessing ourselves, the bottom line is these dollars are coming out of our revenues and being placed over there to cover insurance.
Correct.
Correct, and the claims of insurance.
Correct.
So my concern is similar to the fire departments. Are we in fact examining ways that we can hold down those costs?
Yes.
Because a $1.1 million, I mean, that's to me unacceptable. $1.1 million increase. Do we have the procedures in place to hold down those costs? I know it's a touchy subject, and I've got some of our county employees looking at me like, what are you doing to do? Take away my insurance? No, that's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm saying is, if you were in the private sector, you would see them on an annual basis review their medical policies in such a way to make sure that it's affordable. We cannot continue to cover everybody for everything in all circumstances. So there has to be some limitations there. So I say all that to open up Pandora's box. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And if I can,
Thank you. Mr. Smith, yes, sir. And then Mr.
The one thing that I feel extremely confident in, it is expensive, no matter what you do in health insurance. Whether we go with Cigna or Blue Cross directly, or it's expensive, we know that. We absolutely, on an annual basis, take a look with a third party. We bring in a gentleman by the name of Steve Bird. He helps us, and a couple of other folks, and some folks at BB&T. We actually analyze with third parties. It's not just us. We have a third party, because I don't want a Lee or a Sue or a Pam or a Janice or a Linda Tipton. I want somebody on the outside to say, how it might grade me. And they actually come in and look at our claims, and you don't know, and so employees feel safe. I don't know if somebody had, we may see a surgery, but I don't know exactly because of HIPAA and that kind of thing. Blue Cross also does it. So I have theirs plus these third parties, and we take a look at it. Now, they wouldn't even bid on it. We actually were going to put it out for bid last year. They wouldn't even bid on us last year because they said their premiums were going to be $100 more a month, and they couldn't touch it. This was 3 major companies, including Blue Cross, who helps administer. They said, we can't touch it. And it was because our wellness program had really worked. I mean, it really helped support. We built the fund. We started out with nothing, and we built that $6 million. And the claims flowed in and out of that. And some of this dollars, this increase is coming out of that reserve, which we knew we would do. We plan on, and we pulled out of that reserve before. It's a little bit of a risk, but I always know I need to keep around $1.5 million at all times that you never touch. And with this, I'm going to stay there. Unless I have a major hit or a cancer or a heart attack that I'm not aware of, I think you can be all right. Now, you do the third-party analysis, but I want to give you this. Healthcare reform. Whether we like it or not, if you adjust, and this is coming from the administrator, and going to the association and talking to them, because I've looked at 3 or 4 avenues. If we adjust the benefit portion of it, we will fall outside of the realm of being able to grandfather in and not fall under some of the taxation pieces of healthcare reform, which will hurt us even worse. And I hear clearly what you're saying, that it's expensive. What I'm asking is over the next year, that we examine it, we take a look at it and see can we change it and still stay outside of those healthcare reform rules that absolutely will cost us like industry is getting hammered. Because I think you're right, we have to examine this and our cost.
And maybe we can suggest or come to a consensus that sometime in August, as we do with the fire departments in July, with the survey and the, I think the fee ordinance and all that has come up, those areas in fire. Maybe we can do this with healthcare.
Sure.
And look at this.
All of it.
Work sessions along with, if we get
Absolutely.
into the health and we get into the fire here.
Because I absolutely want you to know it all. I mean, I
So
want
once
you
we
to
get
know
through the
every
budget, if certainly you want.
I agree.
Because it's your call.
As long as we have an understanding that we're going to address it.
Absolutely.
Can't do it now, that's for sure, it's too late. But we need to look at it, Mr. Chairman.
So on 426, I'll get you, yes, sir. On page 426 then, where you have employees and employer, you have the employer actual in 10-11 paying $4,888,000, and then in 2011-12, this went up to $5 million, and then this year you have $5,405,000.
Numbers are off.
That's page 426.
Yeah, that-
28.
I'm sorry, 428. I apologize. So when you look at the $6,745,000, so if you go back in 10, 11, you got $5,664,000, then it goes up to $5,887,000, and now you're going up to $6,745,000. So I can see where your increase is. Of course, you have earnings appropriated, you have the $381,000 added, whereas last year, and the year before, and the year before that, there was nothing added from earnings appropriated. So you have pulled out $381,000.
That's correct.
From that fund.
From that reserve.
But if you go back up to the employer, what I'm seeing here is that revenue is what the taxpayers, because we're self-insured, we are the employer.
We are.
So those funds have gone from $4,800,000 to $5,400,000. So you can see where the funds are coming, are increasing in the.
Under revenue.
Under revenue. But they're all coming from the citizens, the tax dollars.
And you'll see that reflected as we get into expenditures under each department. You'll see that employer line item for health. You'll see it under each one. Correct.
Well, I'll
Mr.
follow up.
Daugherty.
The top line there says employees. I assume that this $695,000 is what we are assessing or charging the employee for family coverage. Is that correct?
Yes, those are the pieces that get charged out.
Those are the pieces that get
Pieces that get
charged.
charged out, they could be retirees that pay so much in. If you've got individual spouse, individual family, individual child, and then they pay into the program.
Who sets those rates?
We do,
We do.
yes. We set those.
We set the rates? What do you mean?
Well, we
Help me
set
there.
how much we charge for, and I will tell you on the.
Who's we?
On the outside, I think we were looking.
The county
at
commission?
that go up. Wasn't that 10%? I'm at, and that reflects an increase this year. We've looked at that going up. We actually, on those paying for family, spouse, the retirees portion was going up, and I think it was equivalent of about, what, $60 a month? Around $60 a month per, and we're collecting that.
Well, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Donnery?
You just opened up another Pandora's box. You said that includes retirees?
Yes.
Now, explain that to me.
October. Well, let's get to the details.
Retirees, we cover retirees?
You have a policy now. As of July 1st, 2009, we do not. But anyone who was here prior to 2009, and by federal law, once you stated that you would give a benefit, you then have to supply that benefit for anybody who stays contiguous service for 25 years. There's not many of them. But if you're here for 25 years and you meet all the requirements of state retirement, let's say you're 59, and then whatever when you can pick up Medicare, when you get the Medicare piece, we actually pick up an apportionment of that. And it's like $120 or something. I mean, it's not a lot, but it's still something we pick up. But we pay a piece of it up until they hit that mark, then Medicare kicks in. But we pay something, but it's like $100 a month or something. I don't think there's 17 people. I mean, there's not a lot of those. But we do set the rates for the other coverage for spouse, family, child. We set those rates. And we do that when we look at all the other rates for, because we're self-insured. I mean, we look at it and try to figure out what's that going to cost us.
Are you saying that we actually pay the premium, or they reimburse us the premium?
We pay the premium, then they reimburse us, because I got to charge it out. And then it's deducted out of their check, an apportionment of that then comes to us that we then fund through this to help pay this fund.
But these are retirees.
Retirees,
And we pay,
individuals.
so are you saying we pay them a check as, for retirement, and we deduct out the,
Most of the retirees send us a check.
they send us a check?
Yeah. Mhm. And they may fall into the program. Now, then you've got COBRA. COBRA allows them to stay under our program for, and now it's been extended. Well, when that happened, so let's say the person and their spouse were on there, they get to stay. But they have to pay us the money. But I still have to account for them being, let's say the individual's gonna cost me $10,000 this year to stay on the insurance. I'm just using a number. They would have to pay me $10,000, but yet they get to stay on the program.
To clarify.
Yes.
Retirees from 2009 back, and you said there's about 17 of them.
There's not many, yeah.
Those individuals that are retirees may opt in to stay on our coverage, but they pay us to be on that coverage.
Yes, they pay us a certain amount.
A certain
I have
amount.
to pull exactly what that amount.
But it is not the full cost.
No,
Okay, it's not the full.
it's not full cost.
They pay a
That's why
portion
we-
of the premium.
That's right, and that's part of, in looking at our, what we call the OPEB study, to look at our future cost of insurance and benefits. We looked at that and said, we can't afford to move forward like this. So we cut it off and said, June 30, or July 1st, 2009, no person working with the county that starts at that point moving forward is eligible for that benefit.
Okay.
Now, if you leave for a day or two and come back, you're ineligible. And we're watching that really come down. That helped us by, because our OPEB cost was like at $34 million, just doing that saved us like $5 million. So,
Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Mann?
Mr. Marty.
I don't want to make a comment on the specifics of the mechanics of what I've just heard, but, well, no, I didn't want to interrupt anybody, I'm sorry, Chairman, I won't ready to interrupt anybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The whole business of, Mr. Dollar, and there was opening Pandora's box. I just want to make a philosophical comment about employees who work for large corporations, and this business of being on the insurance, and then you retire, and you're still able to maintain your place on there. It's going to cost you something. Maybe I see it as a contract that you made with the state or the county whenever you start working and you committed to that employment, and the whole package of paying the insurance. Mr. Daughtry, back there when you were real young, you never used it, and you look there and say, man, they're taking this money out of my paycheck and I'm not using this. But as you get older with families, you'll begin to use it. I just want to make this comment. Some of the benefits as a school employee and a state employee and wherever I worked at, many times I and other employees in that category said, we will accept the fact that we don't get raises as long as we can maintain the benefits. I mean, that's a mentality. And it goes beyond just while you're actively working. You want to be sure that you can stay on that health plan because you did put it all the time and you paid it over time. So I just want to philosophically say that it's not a giveaway to that retiree. It's a continuation of a service that has been provided. I hope I don't misstate that, but I just want to instill the philosophy of why these things take place and how they take place and the commitment over time to what you work with. Mr. Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cromartie, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayo.
Going back to the insurance coverage, Mr. Smith, the COBRA, we do not pay COBRA insurance when a person leaves. We don't pay that. The employees are responsible for that.
They stay on our insurance, but they reimburse us. They have the option, and you're right, they have the option to stay on it at full cost.
That's right.
So whatever our cost is, they have to reimburse us full cost.
Right, but I was just wondering how.
But I have to reflect it in there as a revenue because it's coming in.
That's like, sort of like a pass-through.
It is.
Okay.
But it is. But it's just, but you gotta reflect it somewhere.
Now, on the other note,
Yeah.
on the department heads or managers or whatever, do we have any employees that we pay full family coverage?
That we pay full family coverage?
Yeah, that the county does?
No, they have to pay, they pay some of it. They don't pay it, and we pay some, they pay some.
Okay, no matter if you're a department head or whatever, everybody's the same. Is that
I
correct?
have a contract where it's paid.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm the only one.
Follow-up question.
Mr. Donnery.
Did you just say that the county pays on the family plan? We pay some and they pay some?
Yes.
They don't pay the full cost
No.
of the family plan? And why would that be?
That's how it's set, and that's how we've done it. We've increased that over the years. We increase what they pay, and it ranges, what, $400 or $500? I mean, it's moving up, and we keep increasing it every year, just like we're looking at dependent, that coverage going up again this year, that cost on a monthly basis. So it continues to go up. And we've raised that.
As far as our share, their share, that is modified from time to time?
Yes, oh yeah, that's modified every couple of years. We keep raising up their part.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Aycock, do we know what that percentage is?
I can get it for you and show you exactly. And as part of that study, I mean, I think you need to see that and show exactly what we're doing. I mean, and then you need to tell us, give us your input.
Right. And here again, all of these questions there, write them down and hope that.
And we're making note because this
Certainly
is-
making a note in a sheet that we can have just for healthcare issues,
Yep.
premiums, costs, coverage, the whole gambit. We can do it at the pleasure of the board. Kick out of here July 1 and start this budget, and if you want to do it in July or August, it's whatever's the pleasure of the board, of course. Is that it on that? Okay, it's 12:25. We're through with the expenditures, with the exception of total. Want to make sure that we all understand this going out here for lunch at 12:30. We'll adjourn for lunch and come back at 1 o'clock. I would like to go into facilities, since the facilities director has been here all morning waiting for his turn. But I know that's not the next item. It is on expenditures, but it's about the number 7th or 8th. I would like to do facilities because there's quite a bit that is going to be discussed on facilities. And then we can certainly wrap up the day after facilities, but it'd certainly be up to the pleasure of the board to stay on. You know, if you want to pull the plug at 1:30 or 1 o'clock, whatever, 2 o'clock, it's up to the board. But certainly, we've got a lot to do, and we can come back here at 1 o'clock and do all we want to do. But I do want to ask, if the commissioners have anything they want to say on the total amount here before we break for lunch. When we come back, we get right in expenditures. Mr. Bell? No. Mr. Donnery?
Well, I think we covered a lot today that probably we won't have to recover because, so I know it was a lengthy time there, but I think we've got a lot of things underneath about, probably more than we anticipate. But yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mayo?
Yes, I've learned a lot this morning too. I think you could sit up here at, like Mr. Bell, for 12 or 13 years and you're still going to learn
You'll
something.
find out something new.
You're going to find out something new. It's sort of like reading the Bible, you know. You read it and you find out something different every time. But I think we've made tremendous progress, and I think for all of us, because I'm considering myself, I've only been on the board for a year. This is my second budget. But next year, we're gonna really have a grip on our budget for next year, and that's what I see happening next year. But we're making good progress.
Mr. Aycock?
Yes, sir. Like when some of the other commissioners says, I've learned a lot this morning. In fact, I think it might be above my pay scale. But yeah, I have learned a lot this morning.
Mr. Baker?
I agree with that, and what Mr. Mayo said, or I think it was him, or maybe it was Judge. We probably asked a lot of questions during this part that we probably won't have to ask down the road here.
It's all connected.
But I'm sure that we'll have questions, but
I bet you have some questions.
I bet we will. So.
I bet so too.
Mr. Lamarty?
Oh, I bet.
I will reserve my time for any comment later on, not now.
Sure, okay. Well, again, we've got to the total. 2 years ago, we had revenues in this county of $154 million. Last year, we had revenues of $177 million. Budgeted in 11-12 was $196 million under the other board. That was the budget. The amended budget was $181 million. Actual so far this year is $123 million, which was estimated now to $181 million. And the manager has before us revenues of $161 million. Now, remember, $154 million back in 2010-11, $154 million, that's gross. And then we had a revalve. And then after the revalve, the actual budget the following year for revenue is $177 million. Now, I guess my concern is that the manager is showing a gross here of $161 million. In your message, you were 120, 21, 22 million net. But as you can see, between the net and the gross is 161 million. So the difference, I'm concerned about the revenues, and I'm real concerned about understanding how much we have in what we call, I guess, our special put. But it's when you read $181 million, you're not reading the full story. You're only reading a piece of something that is indicated for one reason or another. But the $181 million is an estimate budget of 12-13. It has nothing to do with $161 million. The $161 million is the gross of what the revenues that have been anticipated by the manager. But I've asked him, and I think the consensus of the board wants to see the net of what it costs to taxpayers and what the revenue is coming in from tax dollars, not grants. or some promise from the state or from the federal government that you might get this or you might get that. So I think this morning has been worthwhile for the citizens of this county that we've taped it, that you see the real story, that you see the true picture with no uncertainties. This is exactly where the money's coming from. You've heard it from your manager. You've had questions asked from all the commissioners to find out where the money is coming from. Now, this afternoon after lunch, and of course Monday, we're going to all figure out how to spend it. And that's the next part of our journey. So let's get some food and come back at 1 o'clock, and we'll do facility.